Update. Am I the a-hole for not stopping my mother-in-law from wearing white? Original post. I'm so confused. Please help. I'm getting married soon and we're having a traditional wedding. I'm Indian. My fiance isn't, but he was fine with having an Indian wedding. My mother-in-law to be asked me if she could wear white to our wedding. I said sure, and now my fiance is really mad at me. He says she is going to try to steal the spotlight and she'll definitely show up wearing a long white dress, and it was very irresponsible of me to just agree to that. The thing is, one, I'm not going to be wearing a white bridal dress. I'll be wearing a traditional red dress that, due to the design, type of silk and embroidery, is very distinctive, so even if my mother-in-law does wear a white wedding dress, it's not like it'll be the same. Also, this may sound dumb, but I don't really get what the big deal is if my mother-in-law wears white, even if I was also going to. As long as the groom doesn't get confused and marry the wrong person, how does it matter? Sorry if this is dumb, but my fiance is really upset that I didn't stop my mother-in-law and I just need some help understanding. I didn't mean to upset him. Edit. My fiance knows what my wedding dress looks like. He has seen it. Edit 2. For those asking if mother-in-law knows how my wedding dress looks, I'm not sure. We've discussed what the wedding will be like. She hasn't been to an Indian wedding before, but I don't think we explicitly discussed what I will be wearing. I feel like she was confused when I said she is free to wear white, but that might be me projecting because the whole conversation was a bit confusing for me. Now for the updates. Update 1. So, as y'all suggested, I talked to my fiance about why he was concerned. He explained that his mother had previously joked that she would wear white, and he had told her point blank that she wasn't allowed to do this. He didn't tell me about this because he didn't want to stress me out. Apparently, she has a tendency to steal attention throughout his childhood, which left some trauma. So basically, when I told mother-in-law that she could wear white, he was very upset that I'd given permission when he had categorically refused. But he admitted it was wrong of him to get that upset when he hadn't shared any of the background information with me. We agreed that going forward, we would be better about communicating and made up. And then he wanted me to call up my mother-in-law and tell her she couldn't wear white or else she was banned from the wedding, which I didn't really want to because that sounded like a surefire recipe for open hostility. And like I said earlier, I don't actually have a problem with mother-in-law wearing white. I told him that he was welcome to tell her if he wanted, but he was insisting I have to tell her because I was the one who gave permission. It was starting to turn into an argument, so I showed him this post, and all of you are great. This really helped. It helped him realize that even if mother-in-law wore white, it really wouldn't stand out. At least not in a positive way, and he loved you guys' idea of just not telling mother-in-law that I wasn't going to be wearing white, so we'll probably offer to buy her a sari, and if she insists on wearing a white dress, we just won't stop her. Thanks to everyone who gave advice. I'll try to update after the wedding. Update 2. Given the way things turned out, it seemed fitting that I post this. I'm the previous poster's then fiance. After Paya, not her real name, posted, a lot of commenters said I was wrong for not dealing with my mother myself, and I was especially wrong for getting mad at Paya without telling her anything. I didn't want to admit it, but the more comments I read, the harder it was to brush it off. I don't have a good relationship with my mother. She was the type to demand gifts on my birthday because I wouldn't be here without her. For 18 years, I never got to open presents myself. Looking back, every event from my games to graduation was always about her. I always felt like my life and achievements were just an extension of her accomplishments. I think I suppressed my resentment because everyone around me always acted like this was normal. I didn't know how to cope with this, so I just tried to get as far away from her as possible. I applied at the furthest university I could realistically get in, and stayed far away because anytime I had a chance to get back home, it was the same story. At the university, I was lucky enough to meet Paya, and for the first time, I started to like who I was. I didn't feel like I had to hide or play down my accomplishments or even my failures. And her family was so warm and welcoming. It felt like my childhood was just a nightmare of the past. I thought I would be able to handle it now as an independent adult. After all, everyone says you're supposed to let sleeping dogs lie, And in my worst moments, I felt jealous of my wonderful fiancé for having such a welcoming, loving family. Even though they were treating me like one of their own, I was ashamed of my mother's behavior and the ugliness of my resentment, so I pretended everything was fine and invited my parents to my wedding. Until this post blew up, I don't think I really understood how important my wedding was to me. I mean, obviously, the whole getting married to the girl of my dreams is huge, but I mean the actual details of the whole ceremony. I actually had a really clear vision of what I wanted in the wedding, but a combination of my childhood trauma and the notion that wedding is the bride's day and not something men are supposed to care about made me unable to express it. I also didn't understand how badly I wanted an event that would be about me and not my mother. This unholy cocktail of repressed and suppressed feelings led me to unfairly lashing out at Paya when my mother tried her old tricks. At that moment, I forgot white was the bridal color in Indian weddings. I just felt a cold sweat that another precious moment would be hijacked by my mother. I think Paya was shocked by my outburst because she had never seen me like this, and made that post just to get some perspective. Neither of us imagined the ramifications it would have. I read every comment at least 10 times. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Unwanted memories kept invading my head. No matter how much I tried to bury my head in work or exhaust myself by exercising, I ended up having an actual meltdown that night. I was sobbing and crying. It was probably my ugliest moment. The next morning, I half expected to wake up alone and get a text that the wedding was off. Instead, incredibly, Paya stayed with me. She convinced me to go to therapy, encouraged me through those first few hellish sessions, and gave me space when I needed it. Therapy really helped. I was able to understand why I was feeling angry and upset, and how to deal with it beyond just trying to ignore it. I apologized to Paya earlier, but it let me actually be honest with her about my family. It really transformed our relationship. I took over the wedding preparation with the help of my in-laws. This turned out to be great for all of us. I got to actually design my dream wedding. My mother-in-law later told me she was really relieved that we switched because my lovely Paya didn't really care any which way about the colors or the flowers and had virtually no input on any of it as long as we were getting married. You might have realized from her post that she's a pretty nonchalant and easygoing person. She used to joke that she was fine with just exchanging garlands and calling it a day. My mother-in-law was also very encouraging and patient in letting me voice my input, and even found things that I didn't but loved, like riding a horse to the ceremony. We have a running joke that I seem more like her son than Paya because her taste is so similar. And the actual wedding went really beautifully. Paya was ready to rescind my parents' invitations completely after everything, but her terrifying little sister suggested we invite anyway as a final sort of FU to show them that I wasn't alone anymore, and no matter what they tried this time, things would go my way. I have to admit, that did appeal to me, so we decided to invite them for the third day of the ceremony, and it worked even better than I imagined. First, it helped that my mother had no real idea what an Indian wedding is like, so when she showed up in a long white ball gown, security actually thought that she had the wrong address and didn't let her in. This was actually something I didn't plan, but the schadenfreude of seeing my mother fuming by the gate while other guests were let in was delicious. Secondly, compared to the embroidered silks and sleek satins of Indian clothes, my mother's ball gown honestly looked frumpy. Instead of stealing the show, she just looked like she didn't belong. Paya looked especially beautiful. I'm probably biased since she's my wife, but she has the most beautiful inky hair. She definitely looked like a princess. I actually forgot about my parents and my insecurity and pretty much the rest of the universe because I couldn't stop looking at her. Then my mother tried really hard to interrupt the ceremony. First, she tried coughing, but luckily Paya's aunt sitting next to her gave her a cough drop. Then she tried to initiate a conversation, but Paya's 5-year-old niece loudly said, in that high-pitched voice of children that really projects, "Don't you know it's rude to talk during weddings? I'm 5 and I know that." I later learned that she had been coached to respond this way by my beautiful, terrifying sister-in-law. The third time she tried to interrupt Paya's cousin, who had also been coached by sister-in-law, jumped up and loudly whispered that the food didn't seem to agree with my mother and needed to go to the bathroom immediately. I'm sure you can guess the implication and basically pushed her away. After that, she stayed embarrassingly quiet for the rest of the ceremony. Throughout all this, she never missed a beat and everyone else acted like she wasn't there. In the after party, the difference between my mother and everyone else was unpleasantly accented by her ignorance of Bollywood and Tollywood dance skills, so she tried to refocus attention through conversation. She turned to my mother-in-law and started to complain about how hard it was to raise me. My mother-in-law, bless her heart, said, "However difficult children are, they bring 10 times as much happiness just by growing. Your son is such a wonderful young man. You must be so proud of him." My mother didn't like the direction of the conversation, so she turned to Paya and asked her if she was sure she wanted to be with me. This was after we had gotten married. Paya looked at her like she was a bit slow and said, "Why would I be marrying him if I wasn't sure?" My mother loudly asked her again if she was really sure because I used to wet the bed. I haven't done that since I was 8, but there she was, loudly announcing it for all in the sundry. And at that moment, I really hated her. I felt like there was something stuck in my throat, but no words came out. But Paya didn't have that problem. "You must be confused," she said, and was also confident with a touch of concern that my mother looked like she was actually confused. Then she raised her voice so it could be heard over the music. "Dear my mother, I know we are family now, but it's much too soon right now or ever for me to hear about your bedroom activities." Then she dragged me away to the dance floor while people started to stare at my mother. Stupidly, the first thing that I said in our first dance as a married couple was that my mother was right. But because I am the luckiest man alive, Paya just squeezed my hand and told me it happens when children are put under stress, and it wasn't my fault. That was pretty much the end of the problem, and I enjoyed the rest of the wedding, dancing, eating food, and talking with Paya. And now my wonderful family. I did see Paya and my sister-in-law having another talk with my mother later, but I was too far away to hear anything. It couldn't have been too bad because my sister-in-law smiled a lot, and my mother didn't try anything new for the rest of the party. By the end of the day, my mother looked incredibly constipated, but she hadn't managed to ruin anything. I felt so relieved when I said goodbye, like a weight had just slipped off my feet, and my knees felt weak. It was the first time in my life that she hadn't taken over something that was supposed to be about me. After that day, I haven't had any more sudden invasive memories of the past. I felt so incredibly lucky to have married this girl, and I feel like that I might have done something really stupid after that fight if I hadn't seen so many strangers telling me the same thing until I couldn't ignore it. So in case anyone was still following this, I wanted to post a thank you. Story 2. Am I the a-hole for being upset my wife will miss her first anniversary for a bachelorette party? Plus update. Original post. The woman, my wife, is missing our anniversary for hates me because I drove a wedge in their friendship since my wife obviously spends a large chunk of her time with me. I also see through her bullying bullshit and do not have patience for her. Anytime my wife tries to include this friend in our plans, the friend whines about nearly everything. Yesterday, she was car sick when we had to drive an hour and a half to and from the place we went as she sat in the back. She tried to solve the problem by eating potato chips and 2 cans of soda, only to keep complaining she felt sick. She was clearly hinting that I should have been the one sitting in the back. But I'm recovering from an injury and the extra room in the passenger seat is helpful. She made some very obnoxious digs into my home country and background to the point where I almost took the train home, leaving my wife with her friends. Living in a new country has already been exhausting. Having to hear things like that from my wife's friend wasn't pleasant. My wife didn't stand up for me against the friend, which hurt my feelings. We spoke at length last night and today about it, agreeing I would never go out with this friend again. My wife also said it was only a matter of time before the friendship ended because she couldn't deal with the negativity and self-centered attitude anymore. On to the problem. April 17th is her first anniversary. My wife is the maid of honor at her wedding and got to choose when the bachelorette party is. She chose the week of her first anniversary, meaning we would be flying home from my home country to a very private getaway, I had planned on our anniversary, and my wife would leave me that night to go to this bachelorette weekend. I'm upset because my wife knew when our anniversary was. She knows this friend doesn't like me at all, and the friend has made digs and comments about my wife getting married before her. I understand my wife is between a rock and a hard spot, but I'm tired of having to be understanding at the expense of my feelings over the friend. Edit. I don't know why everyone is dragging my wife. I have said several times this woman is a bully. Have you never had a friend who is clearly friends with a bully? It's a hard place to be in, especially when the bully has been their friend for nearly 20 years. I've seen my wife interact with this friend and to be mentally drained continuously now. It's a toxic relationship, and those aren't things that are easy to get out of. I have been in a fair few myself, so it's not as simple as she needs to block her. Edit 2. I just had a very long discussion with my wife and explained my feelings. She is ending the friendship with the woman after the other woman in the car's birthday party in a week, so there isn't a fallout. She said her own anxiety about the situation was clouding her judgment and making me feel how I did isn't what she wants at all. I'm an action speaks louder than words sort of person, so we'll see what happens. But she was heartbroken and worried I was going to start the conversation with a divorce. Now for the updates. Update 1. There are many discussions and disagreements leading up to her ending the friendship. Things would grate at me that my wife was still going along with the friendship for the sake of the other friend and their friendship triangle's birthday party. Every day it was like I was more annoyed because she still hadn't even defended me to the friend, and it was showing she cared less about me and how I felt in her country because she knows how much I miss mine. She knew that she needed to end it anyway and said losing our relationship wasn't an option. After a bit of prying, it was clear how psychotic she thinks her friend is. My wife believes her friend will key her car, show up to the house, and cause problems, drag all the other friends involved into it. It all came to a head when I told her I was not returning to her country from mine. We're back in mine for a Christmas thing with my family. If the friendship was still intact. She ended the friendship 2 days later after the friend called me racist towards the very large white 85% plus majority of her country. I am white. As expected, the friend has started to go off the rails. So far, it's been an excessive phone calls, texts. The friend tried to text me and apologize for her comments to salvage anything with my wife, but I had changed my number a week prior. The apology was something along the lines of, "Sorry if what I said hurt your feelings, but your words hurt mine." What I said had just pointed out my frustration with lived experiences from the new country every day. Friendship is over. Wife is worried ex-friend will key her car. She is genuinely fearful of this ex-friend. We will be installing another camera as soon as we get home that only points to her car. I doubt this is the last update, and we actually booked a vacation for our first-year anniversary. Update 2. My wife had an exchange of bachelorette party information with the new maid of honor at a cafe. The new maid of honor and her old friends, she knew exactly why my wife was doing what she did in ending the friendship. The ex-friend made a request through the maid of honor that she wanted my wife to delete all pictures and videos of her from her phone. It was a bit of a head-scratcher with how paranoid the ex-friend is because my wife would never even think to do anything negatively with them. It makes me think what the ex-friend does to all my wife's images and videos from over the years if she is thinking my wife would ever do anything with hers. It just seems like another odd bit of controlling behavior. The only real annoyance other than that is that I've had to spend out of pocket $500 for my wife's dress, makeup, and hair that was paid for already. The dress was $40. She hasn't had hair and makeup done, and someone has already filled her slot as the missing bridesmaid. My wife spent $400 on the hotel room we won't get to use for the wedding day. Nearly $1,000 out of pocket, worth it though. The biggest upside has been my wife is much more relaxed over the last month. She doesn't get sucked into drama via text when looking at her phone now. She isn't on Snapchat having to hear the ex-friend talk horribly about her friends, her fiancé, etc. So the messages disappear. I've always said to her the way she talks about all those others to you, she's talking right back to them the same way about you. We've been enjoying the last month plus of peace and quiet, and hope it stays that way. I likely won't have any other further updates unless something actually happens. That's all for today. If you're enjoying this story, please like the video and share your thoughts in the comments section down below. Thank you.